You're watching Middle East Now. I'm Bianca Zanini. Let's begin with tonight's headlines. Israel steps towards normalization with Lebanon as the two sides kick off talks on border demarcation. Baloch separatists say that they've executed 50 hostages after hijacking a passenger train in Pakistan. And Iran may be holding Israel-Russian captive Elizabeth Tsurkov. I-24 News spoke to her sister on the latest. And White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is in Qatar in efforts to extend the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Mediators are reportedly trying to negotiate the release of more than half the remaining hostages held in the Strip, as questions over the second phase of the deal continue to mount. Israel wants an extension of the first phase. Hamas has so far rejected. We go now live to our correspondent in the field, Balir Sladin, live with us from the IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv. Balir, are you with us? Can you hear us? What is the latest from the ground?
Yes, Bianca, I can hear you, but let's take a look at what's happening here in front of the Kiryat, the IDF headquarters here in Tel Aviv. As we see, dozens of people, more than 100 people, are here in this busy junction, and they are closing at least some of the lanes in front of the Kiryat in this very busy junction in central Tel Aviv. They are calling for the release of all the hostages all in one go. They are calling on the government to reach a second phase of this deal and release all the hostages all at once. They are calling on the government to prioritize the captives, the hostages, and put that goal before any other goal in this war. As we see, the families of the hostages that has been here in camping actually since last Saturday, they are saying that this is a very critical time for the hostages. And by the way, the families of the hostages have filed a petition with the Israeli High Court calling on the government to stop the shutdown of the electricity or the flow of the electricity to Gaza, because they are claiming that this could affect also the hostages that are still in Gaza, remaining in Gaza. As we know, at least 35 of the hostages that are still in Gaza are not among the living, but 24 are presumed to be alive. We have even a sign of life from 19 of them that we have gotten from the hostages that were released during this last deal in the last 2 months. So we know that at least 20 or something around 20 hostages are still alive in Gaza, and the families are saying that the stopping or the shutdown of the electricity to the Gaza Strip could actually affect them as well. And here they are calling on the government to stop this right now. And again, the supporters are here to call on the release of all the hostages all at once.
All right, Balir Sladin, live with us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much. And joining me in the studio is security analyst Jonathan Regev and I-24 News correspondent Robert Swift. Thank you both for joining me tonight. So, serious attempts from the White House to continue to keep this deal alive somehow. Meanwhile, worry from the families of the hostages that the situation right now with the electricity cut off, the partially cut off, the blockade of aid into Gaza, it could affect it. What is the situation right now?
I think, again, it all depends, pretty much like in the last round, on the United States. Israel may have its own ideas, such as Israel is saying, we will not move to phase 2, we will only extend phase 1. Hamas is coming with its own ideas, saying there will not be an extension of phase 1, no such talks as extending it past Passover and Ramadan. We want to go for phase 2. And at the end, it's what the United States will decide, just like as it happened in the first stage, something that will keep both sides relatively satisfied, something that will make leaders on both sides say that they have achieved what they have wanted. Israel can cut off electricity, and Hamas can threaten that it will make the lives of the hostages even worse. I don't think it really makes any difference to the leaders here or the leaders there. Eventually, it's what the United States will decide. President Trump, through his envoys to the region, Steve Witkoff, Adam Bowler, they will eventually have to decide if the United States really wants some kind of movement. They will eventually make it happen. Both sides, they can do the little things that they want, but eventually it's up to Washington.
Up to Washington, but reality on the ground is that Israel has cut off aid for almost 2 weeks now, partially cut off electricity. Are we seeing any pressure on Israel, not just from the U.S., but from other Arab countries? I mean, we have negotiations going on in Doha, an Arab Gulf country. Are we seeing any pressure on that point?
Yeah, there's certainly pressure, particularly it's coming from the European allies of Israel. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has just come out with some comments earlier this evening, and he's not the only European leader to have basically expressed disquiet about the cutting off of the aid, particularly, but also the electricity. Israel has said previously that it estimates that there are several months' worth of aid has already entered into Gaza in the last couple of months during the ceasefire. And so, yeah, we are seeing a bit of pressure towards Israel. Is that really going to change the policy that Israel takes? Like we just heard, it will mostly come down to the US, but Israel's plenty capable of digging its heels in when it wants to. So I'm not sure if these sorts of comments are really going to swing the needle on that.
Right. Thank you, both of you. Just stay in studio with me. Israel is hoping to reach normalization with Lebanon, according to Hebrew media, as the two countries agree to open negotiations on a series of issues. Now, the decision was announced at a meeting between Israel, Lebanon, the U.S. and France at the UN peacekeeping headquarters in Nakora yesterday. 3 teams will be set up to discuss the 5 points in Lebanon where Israeli forces are still present, the blue line that marks the de facto border between the two countries, and Lebanese citizens held by Israel. 5 were released yesterday in a, quote, gesture of goodwill on Israel's part. All this, of course, comes during the current very fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, Israel and Lebanon have managed to successfully negotiate specifics before the maritime border deal in 2022. A full-on normalization, though, would look quite different. What would that be? What could we be looking at?
It's true that there is a possibility for a normalization. On paper, there are not such many differences between Israel and Lebanon that should, on paper at least, prevent a normalization deal. And of course, the Israeli side is portraying a picture in which negotiations are moving forward and things could move. I think that if you ask the Lebanese side, not only Hezbollah, but also the Lebanese government, I think that this is not going to be so fast. It is not only these points that we're seeing there on the map. What, for example, would Hezbollah say about that? There are still ministers on behalf of Hezbollah. Will they be happy with a normalization with Israel? Not so sure.
Right. So let me ask you about this. So if we have a diplomatic effort going on for normalization and to more than normalization to actually solve the border disputes, specific border disputes, where does that leave Hezbollah and their whole raison d'etre in Lebanon that they need to have arms because of the Israeli occupation? If this is something that can be at least we can see a path for a solution to that, could this change the whole game for Hezbollah's reason to be in Lebanon?
The logic of Hezbollah's existence has already been called into question by the actions of the last 3 to 6 months. The whole point of Hezbollah, where it got much of its clout from, was the fact that it was the military power that chased Israel out of Lebanon.
Right.
But that is no longer the case, and it hasn't been for years. In fact, quite the opposite. Hezbollah got into a tangle with Israel, which led to Israel causing massive damage in Lebanon. So Hezbollah no longer have that ability to say, we are here to protect Lebanon. We are here to do what the Lebanese army won't do. That whole rationale has been undermined by the fact that Hezbollah walked into a fight, sort of sleptwalked into this full confrontation with Israel, when it didn't need to. It chose to do that. And then add insult on top of injury, Israel did a pretty effective job of dismantling Hezbollah.
Right, but that said, Hezbollah still exists, and the pushback within the Lebanese community against Hezbollah, is that anyway, can we compare that to the dislike, let's put it in that way, against Israel within Lebanon?
I would say no. And I would say that Hezbollah would always find the reason to maintain its arms, and that reason would be Israel. Let's go back 25 years. Israel left Lebanon in May of 2000, and then Hezbollah said, well, it's true that the Israelis left, and they left because of us, because of Hezbollah, but they did not exactly leave because they're the Shaba farms, for example. So we cannot dismantle, we cannot be dismantled from our ammunition because there's a Shaba farms that we have to free. Say that Israel, it's not going to happen, but say that Israel would one day move away from the Shaba farms. Then there are also 7 points within Israel, former Shia villages in the Upper Galilee. Hezbollah would say, we have to free them. There's always a reason for Hezbollah to stay and stay armed. Why so? Because the conflict with Israel is the main reason for Hezbollah to exist. What would happen? Say one day there would be no conflict with Israel. What then? What would be the reason for Hezbollah to exist?
Well, this is my question right now. We're talking a potential normalization between the Lebanese government and Israel. I'm not saying it's happening tomorrow, but there are talks. There's a breakthrough. We have a Hezbollah that is weaker than it has been before. We have a new Lebanese government. We have a new U.S. government. The situation is different. We have a weaker Iran as well. Is this a possibility right now? Are we seeing an actual opening for Hezbollah to really weaken even further and become perhaps almost irrelevant?
Look, I think that's definitely a possibility. As we were just hearing, like that is definitely one route that things could go down. But there is another scenario where Hezbollah finds some way to evolve past this, moves itself more into a political organization and less of a militant organization. These things have been done in numerous countries. The most obvious example to my mind is Sinn Féin, the political wing of the IRA, during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. They're now, a constant player within Irish and Northern Irish politics. Is Hezbollah going to follow the same path? I'm a bit more sceptical. We hear from their rhetoric the amount to which the armed campaign is part of their character. But that's not to say that they couldn't if they chose to.
All right. Very interesting. We'll certainly keep covering this. The Houthis in Yemen are warning that they will renew their Red Sea naval attacks until Israel ends its blockade of aid to Gaza. The announcement comes after Yemeni rebels issued a 4-day ultimatum to resume the aid flow. More in this report.
Effective immediately, Yemen's Houthis say they will attack any Israeli ship that violates their ban on Israeli vessels passing through the Red and Arabian Seas, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and the Gulf of Aden. The leader of the Iran-backed terror group said on Friday that the group would resume its naval operations against Israel if Israel did not lift a renewed blockage of aid into Gaza within 4 days, and the group's spokesperson reiterated this in a statement Tuesday.
Any Israeli ship attempting to break this ban will be targeted in the declared operational area. This ban will continue until the reopening of the crossings to the Gaza Strip and the entry of aid and necessary food and medicine.
The Houthi ultimatum specifically threatened to resume attacks on Israeli ships, rather than firing missiles or drones at Israeli territory. The Houthis, who control most of Yemen, have staged more than 100 attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea since November 2023, saying they were acting in solidarity with Palestinians over Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. The attacks have disrupted global shipping, forcing companies to reroute to longer and more expensive journeys around southern Africa. Israel has struck Houthi targets in Yemen 5 times during the current war, the most recent being just days before the transition of power in Washington. The Trump administration is expected to provide a stronger American response if the Houthis follow through with their threats than what was seen during former President Joe Biden's term. The U.S. State Department said on March 4th that it was designating the Houthi movement as a foreign terrorist organization after U.S. President Donald Trump's call for the move earlier this year.
Robert, how serious should these threats from the Houthis be taken?
Look, I think Israelis, particularly those in the center of the country and the south around Eilat, they've come to understand what the threat from the Houthis can mean in terms of the long-range attacks that were fired by the Houthis. With regards to the threats to shipping, we've already seen the impact that it's had in the last year with the disruptions to cargo shipping, the increases in commodity costs as ships had to travel the long way around Africa. The Houthis seem a pretty belligerent force. They also seem one that are not easy to change their minds. So if the Houthis are saying they're going to do it, then there's every reason to believe that they could do it.
That they will. I want to ask you, Raghib, the role of the Iranians in the Houthi sort of strengthening right now. They're in many ways seen as sort of the strongest arm of the resistance currently. How much of a role is Iran going to be willing to play here in supporting the Houthis and essentially pushing them to continue this fight?
They have played a vital role for the Houthis. They were their main backers in the previous round when the Houthis disrupted the shipping in the Bab al-Mandab Strait and in everything that went up the Red Sea. So they did play a crucial role there, but under a different American administration. Under the Biden administration, which presented, at least on paper, presented a role that is much more much different, opting more for the diplomatic route rather than the military route. Will Donald Trump now portray to the military route and attack Yemen and open the gates of hell, as he likes to say? I'm not so sure. Trump says that, but will he actually follow through on that? Perhaps. We know that Donald Trump gives a lot of importance to the issue of money and economy, and the Houthis do have the ability, we have to say it fair and square, they do have the ability to disrupt shipment, to raise the prices of commodities, as was just said, and this is something that bothers the American allies in the region. Not only Israel, it has an impact on Egypt,
of course,
because of the Suez Canal. There's far less ships going there, paying the very high taxes paying to the Egyptians. It has an effect on Saudi Arabia. It has an effect on Jordan, on Israel, of course. All these American allies are losing money due to this, and this is something that is very important for Donald Trump. Will he follow through on that and perhaps be more aggressive towards the Houthis? Perhaps. If you want to be more aggressive towards the Houthis, you have to also be more aggressive towards their backers, which are the Iranians. As you said, there are constant reports of some indirect talks between Washington and Tehran. I'm quite sure that the issue of the Houthis is there on the table.
All right, and staying on the topic of Iran, China is hosting a meeting with Russia and Iran this Friday on the issue of Tehran's nuclear program. The meeting, held between the deputy and foreign ministers of the countries, will follow closed-door talks at the UN Security Council earlier that same day on Iran's rapid expansion of its stockpiles of enriched uranium. Now, joining us to discuss what this means is Karis Witte, founder and executive director at the Signal Group. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Karis. So Iran and Russia have become increasingly close recently, and both have rather good relations with China. What can we expect to come out of a meeting like this, just to start off?
I'm not sure that the outcome a bottom line outcome is necessarily what everyone, those three partners are looking for. It's very interesting to think about China's diplomatic efforts in the region. This looks to me like a renewal of its aim to be a diplomatic leader. It tried when it did facilitated the deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It received great accolades and thought it could forge ahead on diplomacy and solving the problems of the Middle East. During the war that we've seen since October 7th, China tried to bring together the 14 factions of the Palestinian groups, and that did not go very far, lead to very much. And then with Israel's strategic wins in the region, which very much rewrote the narrative for Syria, Lebanon, and what's happening in Israel, China started to take a step back from the diplomacy and political efforts and revert to its default of economic and technological efforts in the region. Now, probably through Trump's relationship with Russia, all of those negotiations, Russia steps in and said, let's, talk. And then China brings the three together. China has been very hesitant to be in public with Moscow and Tehran. It doesn't like the label of that tripartite axis. So for China to be doing this on a public level means it sees the potential for it to be at least perceived as a leader in diplomatic efforts that no one else, aka the United States, can do. What can actually come out of it, I think, is much less than the perceived success of China and diplomacy.
Interesting. So it's less about the outcome of the meeting and more about the fact that the meeting itself is being held. The announcement of this meeting comes a day after the Iranian president said that Iran will not negotiate with Trump, calling him a bully. Are these countries essentially sending a message to the West, even though you're saying that China is a little bit hesitant to be part of this image of the three together? Are they sending a message?
I mean, it depends on where you're sitting. The message is not going to be received unless there's a real outcome. And I come back to the issue of the factions that met together. They signed the Beijing Declaration, but literally nothing changed. So unlike with the Saudi-Iran deal, where Saudi Arabia and Iran were already ready to cooperate, here we're talking about Iran talking to Beijing and Moscow about stepping back in its nuclear program. Will it really step back? Will this be the pressure that is necessary? We know that China does not want Iran to have nuclear military capability. That is a definite, and they have been speaking quietly behind the scenes to Iran for many years to slow it down, not let it happen. China has a lot of economic leverage, and it can push buttons. It likes to do it behind the scenes. What will come on a public level out of this? It's very hard to say. It's hard to believe that Iran is going to take any official step backwards.
Right. So I want to dive into what you said about how China does not want Iran to produce nuclear weapons. That said, though, how intent is it on stopping Tehran? And opposite, how ready is it, if at all, to defend Iran if that becomes necessary?
It's not going to defend Iran. China is not going to step in militarily for anybody. China does not want to take serious kinetic efforts on any subject. The only thing that I think most China experts agree on is that it would be around Taiwan and the first island chain. This is far away from that, and definitely would not see China stepping in on a military level. However, China will put a great deal of pressure and use the many tools that it has to prevent Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon out of concern that there could be a conflagration in the region, because Saudi Arabia is completely against Iran getting nuclear military capability. Saudi Arabia is a very important partner for China and a growing partner for China, because it and the UAE are some of the only serious sovereign wealth funds left that are willing to put a major investment into China. That could change. China is trying to reshape its image when it comes to the private sector. But for now, China sees Saudi Arabia as a very important economic link. So allowing Iran to get nuclear capability would threaten Saudi Arabia and certainly would threaten Israel. Everyone's very aware of Israel's military capabilities and the U.S. backing. So I'm sure that China is going to do everything it can to prevent Iran from getting that nuclear bomb that would possibly create a situation where if things go up in flames, China loses enough energy to cause a crash in its own economy.
All right, Carice Witte, thank you so much for your analysis, your input this evening. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Back here in the studio, China not really willing to step in to defend Iran if necessary. Are we seeing an increasingly isolated Iran, and what does that mean for the threats, the effectiveness of the Trump's threats against Iran?
We are perhaps seeing an increasingly isolated Iran. Iran still maintains close relations with Russia based on the assistance that the Iranians provided in the fields of UAVs to the Russians for the war in Ukraine. So yes, there is Russian backing. How much Russia can assist Iran when Russia is facing its own fronts, that's a question to be asked. But again, we're seeing the United States also trying to approach Iran. President Donald Trump said it fair and square. We want to solve this problem, the problem being the nuclear issue. We want to solve this problem. We do not want to solve it through military means. We want to solve it through diplomacy. We will go to military means if there's no other choice. So is Iran isolated? Yes. Are powers such as the United States looking for ways to reach out to Iran? Also yes.
All right, and Robert, any additional words on where Iran stands and how alone it is right now?
I think with regards to whether China would defend it or not, I think it's worth bearing in mind that, generally speaking, China keeps its focus in its own area. So the fact that it wouldn't step up for Iran
is not surprising.
I don't think it's particularly surprising. That being said, exercises being conducted this week in the Gulf of Oman between Iran, Russia, China. So there is clearly there is some cooperation there. I think with this alliance, we have to think of it not as a defensive alliance. It is first and foremost economic, diplomatic. If, however, these three countries, looking forward down the line, felt the need to align more closely, it could eventually move towards more of a defensive cooperation.
All right. Thank you, both of you, for joining us this evening. We have to go out for a quick break, but when we come back, we'll bring you the latest update on the shocking story out of Pakistan, where Baloch separatists have hijacked a train and begun killing dozens of hostages. Much more when we're back in just a few minutes.
Dance, music, and magic immerse you in the story of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, an unforgettable musical where the past and present meet. Welcome to the heart of the most sought-after city in the world. A unique experience only at Kikar HaMusika. Reserve now at thisisjerusalem.co.il.
Bad posture. The ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. Now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly cradles your back and spine with amazing ergonomic support that leaves you feeling refreshed and energized even after sitting all day.
Welcome back. You're watching I-24 News Middle East Now. I'm Bianca Zanini. Turkey is continuing its military operations against Kurdish militants in northern Syria, despite a landmark deal being reached between Kurdish-led militias and Syria's new government just days ago, according to a Turkish Defense Ministry official. The historic agreement sets to integrate the Kurdish-led forces in northeastern Syria into state institutions, while promising to ensure the rights of all Syrians, regardless of their religious and ethnic backgrounds. This marks a major victory for Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa as he tries to unify the many different minorities in the country after more than a decade of civil war. It also comes on the heels of a wave of violence, which killed more than 1,300 Syrians in the span of 3 days. As Ankara continues its operations against the Kurdish militias in Syria, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan welcomes the new agreement.
We see every effort to cleanse Syria of terrorism as a step in the right direction. The full implementation of the agreement reached yesterday will serve the security and peace of Syria, and all our Syrian brothers will emerge as winners. I always say this emphatically. As Arabs, Turks and Kurds, we can spoil the games against us and secure our future to the extent that we exalt our brotherhood. Let us please remember that there is no way to salvation other than by holding each other's hands, embracing each other, and respecting each other's sensitivities.
And joining us to break this down is Sinan Sidi, a senior fellow on Turkey at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Let's just start with the message that we're hearing from Erdogan here.
Right. Erdogan has long talked about, that there's a threat emanating from Syria, which is specifically the Syrian Kurds, aligned with the American-backed SDF, which have long fought and degraded and almost eliminated the remnants of the Islamic State. And this has been mainly a tool for him to essentially woo Turkish voters at home, basically attempting to sell the message that, he has a tough stance on terrorism, when essentially, his whole campaign against the SDF has been nothing more than an attempt at vilifying an organization that has basically carried out the major security interests and concerns of the Western Hemisphere for a long time. He has long threatened and indeed engaged in numerous military offensives and military operations against the SDF beginning in about 2016, but ongoing, and as your report correctly just referenced, even though there been some sort of decision taken by the SDF to sort of integrate into the new interim government Syrian military, Turkish strikes are still going on. So it really is quite mind-boggling what Erdogan expects if he wants to have sort of peaceful coexistence between Syria and Turkey. How his military sort of bombing of a major U.S. partner is going to essentially allow that.
Right, and what is his interests in these Kurdish militias integrating into the Syrian government? Where does he stand really on this?
Look, I think everybody was caught off balance on Monday when the SDF basically announced they were going to sort of signing this deal with the interim government to integrate, because I've talked to the members of the SDF as well as their sort of leadership circles here in Washington, and they're not under any illusions that this the interim government as well as its leader al-Sharaa is somehow a trustworthy person. As we saw, they carried out multiple atrocities over the weekend against Syrian Alawites on the West Coast, and they've also Turkish-backed militias there have also engaged SDF forces since the toppling of Assad. So why this sort of sudden sort of a decision to sign a deal with Erdogan and with the Syrian government? I think it comes down. My suspicion is right now, although I don't know for sure, is this may be part of the deal that we saw announced by Erdogan and the leader of the Kurds in Turkey, who's in prison, Abdullah Öcalan. We don't know what the conditions of that were, but for the Turkish Kurds to essentially come to an agreement with Erdogan of a peace deal, right? I suspect part of that deal was that it had to include a commitment by the Erdogan government not to invade the SDF, because the Syrian Kurds that are led under the banner of the SDF are a direct sort of cousin or a relation of
Yes.
the PKK, which Öcalan leads. I'm suspecting that's part of the deal.
All right, so how, just to try to understand this, how big of a deal is this deal? Are we anywhere near a solution for the fighting between the Kurds and the Turkish-backed forces in Syria?
I'm skeptical. We have not seen anything on paper between, Turkey and Öcalan. We've seen one piece of paper released by SDF and the Syrian and the regime in Syria, right? It's basically very sort of perfunctory and very sort of top surface level. My suspicion is this word integration of the SDF into the Syrian military may carry a very broad meaning. I don't think they'd be willing to lay down weapons or just dilute themselves as a fighting force into the Syrian regular army. I think they might want to take a sort of wait and see approach, but at the very least, it avoids a direct military confrontation between the SDF and the Turkish military, which the Turks have long since sort of threatened, right? But it also provides Erdogan cover, an excuse not to invade and militarily engage the SDF inside of Syria, because doing so would be both costly in terms of military expenditures, but it also, fighting the SDF, which is almost 100,000 strong fighting force, would likely result in heavy Turkish casualties, and nobody wants that inside of Turkey. So I suspect this is all part of a wider deal, but we have not been given any details at all whatsoever.
Well, I guess we're going to have to keep a close eye on the developments. Sinan Sidi, thank you very much for joining us this evening. NATO is urging the EU and Turkey to improve their relations. This as Europe looks for ways to scale up its defense capabilities after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to withdraw American security guarantees to his NATO allies. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte highlighted the need to involve non-EU allies in EU defense efforts. And despite clashing with Turkey repeatedly on a number of issues, this thinking includes Ankara.
From our point of view, it is very important that NATO and European countries simultaneously effectively guarantee stability after achieving a ceasefire and peace on the Russian-Ukrainian border. And Turkey's role here may be key.
Now, all of this comes as Turkey is reportedly blocking any new cooperation, including on military drills between NATO and Israel, until a permanent ceasefire is reached in Gaza. Now, joining me to break this down is Zina Bribua, a research fellow at the Hudson Institute. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I want to start with Turkey. It seems to be in a quite good position to negotiate, to promote its interest within NATO and with the Europeans more generally. How would you expect to see that dynamic going forward?
Well, I think that Turkey shares with NATO several sets of interests. One of them, it's not just to counter Russia, but also Iran. And this is where, for example, the reports of Turkey blocking Israel from NATO drills, there's something that Erdogan has, and it's really the art of talking one way and acting another. Because really on the ground, the real action, it's really on the ground where the real action is happening. It's not Israel that's feeling squeezed, it's Iran. Let's not forget that in Syria and Iraq, Turkey is expanding its influence. It is weakening Iranian-backed militias. In the Horn of Africa, it is brokering deals to limit Tehran's reach in East Africa, Somalia and others, and Turkey's play within NATO, especially when it comes to protecting NATO's southern neighborhoods, is really a big attack on Iran's proxy network. So I think that while that beneath the surface, Ankara's real strategic play is really about curbing Iranian expansion, and that really actually aligns with Israel's interests.
Interesting. So let's break this down. On the one hand, Erdogan is pressing the pedal on his expansionist policies and ideas for Turkey, especially in the Middle East, also when it comes to Iran. And on the other hand, it also wants good relations with the U.S. and Europe, playing both sides on Ukraine and Russia. Erdogan really is managing this very difficult balancing act. Does the EU and the US view Turkey now as a reliable partner, though?
Well, I think, first of all, Turkey is part of NATO, so the role is already settled. But as you said, it's a very complex situation. Erdogan has always been able to conduct deconflicting strategies. For example, you will see him shake hands with Putin and another Iranian envoys and ambassadors and so on. But you will also see him on the ground doing everything he can to make sure that they don't expand his influence. And while that seems very unsettling, I think that for the United States and Europe, it is a real opportunity to explore because Turkey is especially regarded, for example, in regards to Russia, it's regarded by Putin as a very important player. It has not only a good posture when it comes to Black Sea, and it has a really strong Black Sea strategy, which can put Russia in trouble. So I think there are a set of options to explore here with Turkey.
All right, and you're mentioning that on Iran, Turkey and Israel's interests align. That said, the relationship between Turkey and Israel has really taken a deep dive, and especially when it comes to the rhetoric. So how does Turkey's stance on Israel impact its relations with Washington?
Well, I think that, of course, Erdogan's rhetoric is very aggressive and borderline anti-Semitic. But I think this is where Washington's role will be quite important, because the United States is really looking right now at withdrawing from Syria. And to do so, they will need to start talks with Turkey. Turkey plays an enormous role in northern Syria, where the United States is, and making sure that Turkey and Israel reach some sort of accommodation, put aside their differences and focus really on the big picture, which is to not have Iran back on the Mediterranean. I think this is a very good opportunity to explore. From a Turkish standpoint, I think they see Israel's backing of SDF, of Kurdish groups, as really threatening to their security. And I think that now, given the recent developments with SDF, that can be something that Washington can mediate.
All right, Zina Bribua, thank you very much for your insight, your analysis this evening. Shifting gears now, nearly 350 hostages have been rescued at the end of a deadly standoff between Pakistan's military and armed militants who hijacked a train in the southwestern Pakistani province of Balochistan. The incident, which began Tuesday, left dozens dead. More in this next report.
Nearly 350 hostages have been rescued at the end of a deadly standoff between Pakistan's military and armed Baloch separatists who hijacked a train in southwestern Pakistan on Tuesday.
One of my relatives is an employee at the National Bank and the other was a laborer. They were on vacation and were going back home, but they too were taken hostage on the train. So far, I don't have any information about them.
I have been here many times since last night, but I have not received any information about my brother, who was also on the hijacked train. I don't know who to ask about his condition or where he is.
At least 27 militants have been killed. The train entered a tunnel in Bolan, a district in the restive Balochistan province. The train was traveling down the tunnel when militants blew up the tracks, immobilized the engine, and seized control. Authorities said the rescued people included women and children, while an undisclosed number of security personnel have been killed. The Baloch Liberation Army group has claimed responsibility for the attack, saying it was open to negotiations to swap prisoners. But so far, there has been no response or any indication from the Pakistani government to the offer from the insurgents.
The motive of our attack was very clear. It was a simple and clear message to China and Pakistan to withdraw immediately from Balochistan.
The BLA regularly targets Pakistani security forces, but has also in the past attacked civilians, including Chinese nationals working on multi-billion-dollar projects related to the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Balochistan borders Iran and Afghanistan and has long been a hotspot for separatist insurgencies, with militants demanding greater autonomy and a larger share of the region's natural resources.
Joining me on this is Aditya Raj Kaul, an executive editor at National and Security Affairs at TV9 Network. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is a dramatic escalation of a conflict that's been going on for decades. Now, some analysts are saying that the insurgency has evolved both in its strategy and scale recently. What are we seeing here?
Well, the Baloch struggle has been underway for a very long time, as you said, for decades together. But recently, what has really transpired is that all these rebel groups, all these separatists, for the first time, have come together under the BRAS banner. And that means that they are more powerful and they are more joined in their activities, be it the militant activities, the armed struggle that they call, or the peaceful protest against the enforced disappearances. In this particular case, I can tell you that this is an unprecedented attack against the Pakistan army and the forces, because the train that was traveling had more than 110 Pakistani army soldiers also traveling on it. And in total, there were about 440 passengers. The Pakistan army statement as of now says that 33 rebels have been killed. And apart from that, there are 21 passengers and 4 soldiers who have been killed as well. But the Pakistan Army's reality of coming up and owning up the killing and casualty figures of its soldiers isn't really great over the years. It hasn't really come out and admitted the real casualties that it has been facing in Balochistan or other areas like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where TTP, the Taliban, is a major problem. So as of now, I think the Balochistan struggle or the rebel movement as of now is gaining momentum. Unfortunately, we also see a lot of killings in this, particularly for Baloch rebels, the Pakistan Army, the Frontier Corps, and the Pakistan Deep State, that is the ISI intelligence agency, remains a main target and not civilians. In this case, also the Baloch civilians were freed, interestingly, but the soldiers were kept captive.
Tell me a little bit more about these separatists and what their goal is, and also who is funding them at the end of the day.
Well, the Pakistan Army recently came out with a statement, in fact, just an hour ago, and the Pakistan Army says that the epicenter of this conspiracy of the Baloch in this particular attack is in Afghanistan. That is very interesting because usually, it has blamed India in this. But in this particular case, it says that they have multiple recordings of satellite phones being used by the Baloch rebels to speak to their handlers who are based in Afghanistan. Now, that brings us to a bigger question. That is the Taliban based in Afghanistan helping the Baloch Liberation Army, or is there a strategic alliance or an alignment between the Taliban in Afghanistan and the Baloch rebel groups in Balochistan? If that is so, it's not a good news for Pakistan, because over the years, we've seen the TTP, the Taliban that is in Pakistan, having an alliance with the Afghan Taliban and creating a havoc, a lot of violence in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan, where almost on a daily basis, there are killings and attacks on the Pakistani security forces or the militia that support the Pakistan government. So as of now, many Pakistanis had predicted that the Baloch movement would end, but we're now witnessing newer collaborations and newer strategic ties developing. And over the last 3 years, I can tell you as a Balochistan watcher for a very long time, that the Baloch attacks and violence against the Pakistan Army and the Frontier Corps have increased multifold. The demands you asked are only 2. One, that the enforced disappearances, that is the abduction of a lot of Baloch activists and political prisoners that has happened over the years, that needs to stop, and they're asking for them to be released. And the number goes up to a whooping 50,000. And otherwise, the bigger demand that has always been the independence of Balochistan. Whether that will happen or not is a bigger question, but as of now, it does seem that the Baloch rebels continue to create problems and violence for the Pakistani state.
All right, and just finally here, we have talked about the role of the Taliban. You mentioned India. What about China's role in this? As we heard in the report, we heard the separatists themselves saying that this is against Pakistan and China.
Yes, this is a very good question. I can tell you that the Chinese have been exploring natural resources in Pakistan. The China-Pakistan economic corridor also goes through Balochistan. And apart from that, the Gwadar port is a strategic port of Pakistan, where China has been given a complete free hand. So the Baloch rebels regularly over the years have come out hitting out at China and saying that, the China cannot use Balochistan as their colony. And that's what Pakistan is trying to do now, giving a free hand to the Chinese to explore mining rare minerals across Balochistan. And over the years, we've also seen continuous attacks by the Baloch on the Chinese engineers, Chinese teachers, or anybody from Chinese government who has come to Balochistan for any infrastructure-related activity. Recently, we've also seen suicide attacks, suicide bombings in Karachi and in Balochistan. And interestingly, it's not men, but women of Baloch ethnicity who have come out to have this kind of a suicide bombing against the Chinese. So it does seem that both for the Pakistani deep state, that is the ISI and the army, and the Chinese, they have a lot of interest in Balochistan, but it doesn't seem like that it's going to be a smooth ride for them. And these attacks and this violence is unfortunately going to increase.
All right, Aditya, Raj, Kaul, thank you very much for your insight, for your information passing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Iran may have been involved in the kidnapping of Israeli-Russian academic Elizabeth Turkov. She was taken in Baghdad in March 2023 by the Iranian-backed Shiite militia Kataib Hezbollah, according to Israeli officials. A Princeton University student, Elizabeth was on a research trip when she went missing, and the U.S. has recently raised the pressure on Iraq's prime minister to free her. While Iraq insists it doesn't know where Elizabeth is being held, Iran's potential involvement in the situation could further complicate things. Elizabeth's sister spoke to our Hebrew sister channel just a short while ago.
I am optimistic because there really was an 180-degree change in the attitude of the new American administration compared to the previous administration. For me, it's not over until it's over. Until I hug her, it's full throttle forward, and I will continue with all my efforts because we know how easily things like this can go wrong, and until she's home, the struggle will continue. I know that she is alive, that she is in Iraq, and being held by a branch of Hezbollah. I have no information about her health condition, which in itself is a worrying matter, not only because she has been in captivity for 2 years, which in itself is a serious health risk, but she was also kidnapped only 8 days after an emergency spinal surgery that she had to have in Baghdad. The most important and most hopeful part is that the current U.S. administration is really demonstrating extraordinary determination. There is Iraqi propaganda. Every time the Iraqis are uncomfortable dealing with the situation, they're supposedly a sovereign state, but in reality, they do not function as a sovereign state. So they try to evade responsibility and say she is in Iran. She's not in Iran. She's in Iraq and is being held by a terrorist organization that is part of the Iraqi security forces. To leave her to languish in captivity because of a tweet from a decade ago seems to me to be unspeakable cruelty. Whether she tweeted or not, it is clear to me that she cannot be left in captivity, and I am encouraged to see that the current U.S. administration is taking the issue of her kidnapping seriously and treating it as a core issue in terms of the relationship between the U.S. administration and the Iraqi government.
At least 6 people were killed in Somalia when al-Shabaab militants launched an assault on a hotel where local elders and government officials had gathered for security discussions. More in this next report.
A car bomb rattled a central Somali city, kicking off an hours-long militant attack centered around a hotel. The Cairo hotel houses traditional elders and military officers involved in coordinating the government's offensives against the militant group al-Shabaab, an al-Qaeda affiliate that has claimed responsibility for the attack. Beledweyne is north of the Somali capital Mogadishu and is a strategic military hub in the ongoing campaigns against al-Shabaab. Estimates of the death toll vary, but local residents said at least 6 people, including 2 well-known traditional elders, were killed. Other witnesses put the number of casualties over 11.
They first attacked us with a vehicle laden with explosives. Since I was among those on duty during the initial attack, I also fought against the assailants. We truly fought to the end, but there were also suicide attackers. One of them detonated himself inside, resulting in the highest number of casualties.
Al-Shabaab frequently carries out bombings and assaults, targeting government offices and military personnel in the Horn of Africa nation. The group controls large parts of rural Somalia and poses a significant threat, despite sustained military operations by government troops and African Union peacekeepers.
That's all we have time for in this evening's broadcast, but we will be back tomorrow with more news and analysis from Israel and the Middle East. I'm Bianca Zanini. Thank you for watching.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing i24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News app today.
How do you get your news? How do you know what sources to trust? And to paint a clear picture of the entire story, you need a breakdown of the constant stream of events, top stories, expert analysts, and the best journalists bringing you real voices on the ground. We're breaking it all down on The Rundown. Get the facts, stay informed, and be a voice of reason for the Middle East.
Introducing the brand new i24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions, and expert commentary, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News Video On Demand app today.
Elegance of the Whippet, Muccia, fabulous, wonderful win. Italy in the top spots. That's a marvellous result.
Really sweet dog, easy to be around, and now has that impressive trophy. I think he's just going to take care of Muccia for the moment.
Everybody ready?
Expanding the circle of peace. Is some level of normalization between Israel and Lebanon viable down the line? Full diplomatic relations could be on the horizon. We take a deeper look. Talks continue in Qatar with an Israeli team working to secure the release of 59 hostages still held in terror captivity in Gaza. I-24 News speaks to the family of hostage Matan Angrest, who appeared in the most recent Hamas psychological propaganda video. And it's an all-time high for El Al, the Israeli airline's profits soaring to new heights during the war. Its net profit growing nearly fivefold in 2024. So what does this mean for the cost of future travel in and out of the country? This is the rundown on I-24 News. I'm Denise Levine. The goal is to reach normalization. Israel is aiming to set up full diplomatic relations with Lebanon in talks that could start as early as next month. The comments from an Israeli official coming a day after Israel, Lebanon, France, and the US met in southern Lebanon at UN peacekeeping headquarters. The Prime Minister's office saying the military-to-military meeting in Nakura saw stakeholders agreeing to open negotiations to delineate the border between the two countries. Now, the next meeting will be between the political echelons of Israel and Lebanon, which means official Israeli diplomacy within Lebanon. Significantly, of course, Israel and Lebanon do not recognize one another, but did sign a short-lived peace agreement in 1983. Israel in the past enjoyed deep military and economic ties with Christian factions in Lebanon. And of course, in a monumental move at the time, back in 2020, Israel normalizing relations with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Morocco, part of the historic Abraham Accords. So, what happens next when it comes to expanding the circle of peace? Well, to give us more insight, it's a pleasure to welcome to studio Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the US and the former Israeli deputy foreign minister, and Jonathan Regev, security analyst. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. Much to discuss, and I want to start with something one never thought would roll off the tongue at this juncture: possible normalization between Israel and Lebanon. Fascinating meetings in Nakura. Your insights, a lot at stake.
Yes, these are fascinating times. First of all, we had this infamy of the 7th of October. Since then, we had a major defeat of Iran and its axis, the Hezbollah and, of course, Hamas. And to top it all, Trump was elected, which, again, stirs up the pot. So with Lebanon, certainly now, the situation is much more comfortable for Israel. Hezbollah is no longer holding veto power as it did. And hence, we have this negotiation. But I am afraid that to talk about normalization and peace with Lebanon, it's a little bit premature. I think first we will have to take care of all the contention bones on the border. There are 5 actually positions of Israel inside Lebanon. There are about 13 points of border corrections and some other issues. But I can tell you that historically, before Hezbollah and Iran took over Lebanon, Lebanon was the softest of the Arab countries towards Israel. This was the time when they had a Christian majority. Before many of them were driven out, before PLO took over in the mid-70s. But now it seems like we're going full circle, and certainly the time now is ripe to make the move and to prepare the ground. Again, it's not going to be around the corner, but once we iron out all the differences on the border issues, I think we can talk about normalization, and that would be another coup for all of us and for President Trump.
Baby steps indeed, but at least the process is happening. Jonathan Regev, Israel, Lebanon, France and the US already talking about these working groups to discuss looking at the border and other issues as well, with Hezbollah out the loop, so to speak. It makes all the difference right now.
Hezbollah out the loop, yes, but in the Lebanese government, also yes, sir. If I remember correctly, 5 ministers from the Shia bloc, meaning Hezbollah and Amal. So can the Lebanese government go for a full-on normalization process with Israel with ministers who basically represent the Iranian arm inside Lebanon? Not so sure. Those factors in Lebanon that are now speaking of a possible normalization with Israel are the Christians, the Druze, and if it were up to them, I think we would have normalization with Israel a long time ago. But it was always Hezbollah, and not only Hezbollah, also there's a very big Sunni population. They may be rivals with Hezbollah, but that does not make them friends with Israel at all. Therefore, I'm not so sure that all of the factors within Lebanon would want to see normalization with Israel. There was a very quick response from Lebanon today as soon as the message from the Prime Minister's office came saying that the long-term process is meant to bring normalization in Lebanon. There was a very quick response from Lebanon saying no. We want to solve disputes with Israel, border disputes. Yes, normalization. Let's not speak about it for the moment. Therefore, do I see it happening soon? No. Ask me a decade ago if I would think that Dubai would be the most popular destination for Israeli tourists. I would also say no. Therefore, things can happen. Lebanon is a difficult country. Regardless of Israel, it has its own issues. It is completely divided between the Shias, the Sunnis, the Druze, the Shias, the Christians, of course. We're seeing what is happening in Syria with pretty much the same groups. So I think they would have to solve the problems within before we're speaking of any normalization with Israel.
Hence the baby steps, as we discussed.
And talking of those baby steps, we can't ignore what is happening at this juncture inside Syria. Talk about changing dynamics. Israel, of course, watching these developments very keenly. Down the line, as you say, a long way off, what would some kind of normalization between Israel and Lebanon mean for future ties with Syria, albeit a long way off?
Well, let's see. I would say that Lebanon is quite now detached from Syria. Not only that, now that Israel took some positions for defending ourselves, especially on the Syrian, what used to be the Syrian peak of the Hermon, which we can oversee and control basically most of the passages between Syria and Lebanon, which used to be used for arms smuggling from Iran all the way. Syria is in a lot of tumult, and right now I don't think we can discuss anything possible. I would say in Syria there are two main situations with many, many shades of gray, but I would say one is, outcome could be gluing back the Syrian country. The other one is that Syria is never going to be glued back and is going to be broken, up into the different areas of control, Druze, Kurds, Sunni, Alawis, and all that. Seems like it's moving towards that more than anything else. And I think that as time passes, we see the true colors of al-Julani, which tried a charm offensive towards the West, but it seems to do the same old jihadistic, brutal murders.
Certainly tried to pitch himself as moderate. It seems the evidence suggests otherwise, but let's talk at the security concerns, because obviously when we look at any neighbor, security is top of mind. And we know just a short while ago, the IDF confirming, Jonathan, the extent of the airstrikes in southern Syria, targets from the former regime of Bashar al-Assad were hit, and in a big way. What is known?
Yes, the extent shows us that this famous phrasing saying that the enemy of the enemy, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, is not exactly true in the Middle East. Al-Julani was perhaps the enemy of Bashar al-Assad, but is clearly not the friend of Israel, and Israel did act in a very forceful way. Just about an hour ago, the IDF releasing information saying that some 22 fighter jets participated in the very big attack on Monday night in Syria, with some 60 different bombs targeting various targets in Syria, especially in southern Syria, but not only there. Most of the targets, according to the IDF, were they had the ability to threat the state of Israel. The sites attacked mostly belong to former Assad regime military camps. If they're former Assad regime, now they're in the hands of the current regime under al-Julani. And for Israel, the fact that al-Julani toppled Assad does not mean by in any means that this is a friendly regime for Israel, and that is why Israel has to attack this ammunition. Whether it's in the hands of the former regime or the current one, it's currently a threat for the state of Israel.
And any threat needs to be taken care of, so to speak, no doubt about that. Gentlemen, stay with us. We've got much more to discuss in the region because talks continue in Qatar with an Israeli team working with the US to try to secure the release of 59 hostages still held in terror captivity in Gaza. 24 of the hostages are believed to be alive. They are set to be freed in the next stages of the deal, but details in phase 2 have yet to be finalized. Discussions in Doha focusing on the so-called Witkoff plan. It would see a ceasefire extension of around 2 months, and in that time, Hamas would release about half of the living hostages. The rest of the hostages would be freed at the end, along with an end to the war. So, for more, let's go straight away to correspondent Balich Sladin. He joins us from Tel Aviv, and we know that women in white shirts were taking a stand outside Israeli Defense headquarters earlier. They want a deal that brings the hostages out of terror captivity. What is the latest there? What can you tell us, Balich?
Yes, Benita, let's take a look at what's happening here in front of the Kiryat, the IDF's headquarters in central Tel Aviv. As we see, the protesters here are closing even a few lanes, and they are continuing with their demonstration here today. This is the fourth day in a row where the encampment continues in front of the Kiryat since actually last Saturday, since the big demonstration that happens weekly. They are continuing, and they apparently will stay here until next demonstration that is going to take place as well here and also in the hostages square, and of course with the encampment here continues. And while we're talking about the demands here of the protesters, which is of course the release of all the hostages and going to the second phase of the deal, ending the war and bring back all the 59 hostages, now we have some maybe positive news in terms of the signs of life that the families of the hostages that remain in Gaza has gotten today. Another sign of life from Avi Natan Or is being reported by Israeli media. We're talking about a young man. He is the boyfriend of Noah Argamani. They were both kidnapped on October 7th, and their video went viral actually on that day. Noah was rescued in June in Arnon operation, and he's still in captivity. Now we know that at least 20 of the 24 hostages that believed to be alive are actually sending a sign of life today. So Avi Natan Or, one more hostage that is apparently his family got in a sign of life from him as well.
And still the urgency remains to get all the hostages back home as soon as possible, especially when you hear more and more about the conditions in terror captivity. Balich, we know the Israeli negotiating team was expected to return home tonight from Qatar, but if there was any kind of breakthrough, they could stay on in Doha. So what are you learning? What is the latest out of the Qatari capital?
Yes, to my understanding, there is nothing that we can call a breakthrough, but our sister Hebrew channel actually reported that the delegation, the Israeli delegation that went to Qatar and that was supposed to come back this night, apparently they're going to stay for one more night, which means that there is some optimism that the developments could go in the right direction. For now, as we understand, the mediators and the Israelis and of course Hamas are waiting for Steve Witkoff to actually join them and maybe try to get some work done in terms of reaching some sort of a deal. You've talked about the current proposal, which is 10 living hostages in exchange for 60 days of ceasefire. To my understanding, we're talking also about a proposal that talks about a fewer number of hostages hostages in exchange for a fewer number of weeks of ceasefire and, of course, the return of the aid to the Gaza Strip. Either way, the Israeli side is expected, according to the report, to accept any of this because of the pressure that we see here in Israel and, of course, abroad. Israel wants to see as many hostages as possible back before it is time to declare the end of the war. Until now, the Israeli government is saying that we cannot declare the end of the war until we eradicate Hamas, but at least we can extend the ceasefire in order to get back as many hostages as possible. Netanyahu is expected to say yes to such a thing, but again, nothing that we can call a breakthrough for now.
And it's clear the pressure on the Israeli government and decision makers, Balich, but give us an understanding of who exactly is putting pressure on Hamas right now. Is it Qatar? Is it Egypt? Is it the US? How worried is the terror group about the stick that Donald Trump is wielding right now? What can you tell us?
Yes, well, let's get things straight. The only thing that can put pressure on Hamas is the Israeli military operation there. This is the only thing that they can actually consider to be a pressure on them. That's what led them to agree to the last deal. That's what also led them to agree to the first deal back in November 2023. Either way, that's the only thing that can make them decide on releasing more hostages, because they need more days of ceasefire. Of course, they need the caravans, the heavy machinery in order to convince the Gazans to go back to the north. That's their way to ensure that Israel would find it very difficult to return to war. So we see that this is the only thing. Of course, the mediators and the Americans specifically, with the statements that we hear almost every week from Donald Trump, and even tonight, about the condition of the hostages and the fact that they should be released immediately. That's something that can, of course, be a consideration for Hamas. But again, the only thing that can put pressure on Hamas is the military pressure by the Israeli military, and that's the only thing.
Live from Tel Aviv, thank you so much, as always, correspondent Balich Slatin. Thank you. Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the US, given your diplomatic background, your thoughts on exactly that. What is it going to take? Who is it going to take to put pressure on Hamas to get all the hostages back home? Is it military? Is it diplomatic?
Well, it is true that mostly it is military. Also, given the experience that they have after November of last year, they know the level of devastation that they can really carry, and hard would be for them to absorb, certainly now with Trump, who is going to let Israel do another operation in much more advantageous circumstances. No humanitarian aid that went to Hamas and strengthened Hamas, and we saw it. That's why they are still standing. Of course, using any munitions that Israel deems right, no limitations over there. Also, I think that the Trump's statements also make even a psychological pressure on Hamas, but also on the mediators, Qatar and Egypt. And Qatar also can exert a lot of pressure on Hamas if indeed they will kick out of Doha the Hamas leaders who enjoy their very beautiful life in five-star hotels and many other fringe benefits. So, and Egypt as well, of course, by sealing the border. So if we take each of those elements, maybe will not suffice, but all of them together may make a difference, although it's still far-reaching. And Witkoff, the fact that the Israeli delegation stays for another night is because of direct request from Witkoff, and his skillful negotiation may also bring some breakthrough.
Certainly the impact of the US on negotiations, not only in Doha, but as we discussed earlier on in the show in Nakura, is quite clear. Gentlemen, stay with us because there are other threats to discuss too. The Houthis in Yemen are promising to resume their attacks on vessels in the Red Sea until Israel allows aid back into Gaza. The announcement overnight by the Iranian-backed group coming after the Houthis issued a 4-day ultimatum. Israel had stopped the supply of power to the enclave to try to pressure Hamas to free the hostages in terror captivity. More in this report.
Effective immediately, Yemen's Houthis say they will attack any Israeli ship that violates their ban on Israeli vessels passing through the Red and Arabian Seas, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Gulf of Aden. The leader of the Iran-backed terror group said on Friday that the group would resume its naval operations against Israel if Israel did not lift a renewed blockage of aid into Gaza within 4 days, and the group's spokesperson reiterated this in a statement Tuesday.
Any Israeli ship attempting to break this ban will be targeted in the declared operational area. This ban will continue until the reopening of the crossings to the Gaza Strip and the entry of aid and necessary food and medicine.
The Houthi ultimatum specifically threatened to resume attacks on Israeli ships, rather than firing missiles or drones at Israeli territory. The Houthis, who control most of Yemen, have staged more than 100 attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea since November 2023, saying they were acting in solidarity with Palestinians over Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. The attacks have disrupted global shipping, forcing companies to reroute to longer and more expensive journeys around southern Africa. Israel has struck Houthi targets in Yemen 5 times during the current war, the most recent being just days before the transition of power in Washington. The Trump administration is expected to provide a stronger American response if the Houthis follow through with their threats than what was seen during former President Joe Biden's term. The U.S. State Department said on March 4th that it was designating the Houthi movement as a foreign terrorist organization after U.S. President Donald Trump's call for the move earlier this year.
Still in studio, security analyst Jonathan Regev. The Houthis, we know, had the capabilities to try and reach Eilat, even Tel Aviv. They say they're going to target vessels in the Red Sea. How worrying is this? There would be an immediate response.
It is worrying because, as you said, the Houthis showed that they have the capabilities. Can Israel stop this threat all by itself? I would have to say no. I don't think so. I don't think Israel can have the ability to topple a regime that's about 1,000 miles away from here. It would have to be some work of an international coalition, and in the sense, of course, here as well, as in Lebanon, as in Doha, led by the United States, as opposed to the previous cases when it was done in the days of the Biden administration. Now we're speaking of the Trump administration. Donald Trump is very... We know that Donald Trump and his administration, if there's one thing that they value a lot, it's money. And the Houthis have proven that they have the ability to bring economic chaos to Israel, for example, because ships have trouble coming in from the Indian Ocean and into the Red Sea and into the port of Eilat, for example. They also have the ability to bring chaos to Egypt because far less ships go through the Suez Canal, which brings a lot of revenue for Egypt. Also, ships do not go, less ships go for Saudi Arabia, for example. Anybody using the Red Sea is under the threat of the Houthis, and it brings economic chaos. This is something that the Trump administration, I think, is more worried if we compared it to the Biden administration. Therefore, I think Trump would be more willing to act forcefully against the Houthis compared with the Biden administration. I don't think Trump would be that worried in case red alert sirens would sound in Eilat or in Tel Aviv. With this, Israel can cope. It's a headache, but it's something that Israel can cope with. The economic chaos, which is something that is far bigger than just Israel, is of course something that the U.S. would perhaps be more involved in.
And Ambassador, as Jonathan is outlining, the impact on global shipping is something that would be worrying not only to the U.S. but to many nations across the region.
Absolutely, including allies or seemingly allies of the Houthis and the axis of Iran, namely the Chinese. So it is certainly a global threat, and it should take a global answer. And so far, I'm sad to say that under the stewardship of Biden, there was no major response. It was only pinpointed and far and few between. I think a much heavier response could make a difference, and a threat to Iran. Without Iran, the Houthis would not be in any position to fire even one missile.
Which brings me to my next question, and that is the threat out of Iran. As we speak, much has been made about what steps might be taken to counter any nuclear ambitions. This is brewing on the side while we talk about Lebanon, Syria, and the Houthis. Your sense of the urgency for some kind of action, potentially preemptive?
Well, first of all, I think it all mostly depends, of course, on the U.S. and Trump made no secret that he would like to have a diplomatic solution. For that matter, he wrote a letter to the leader of Iran, Khamenei, which so far acted quite disparagingly.
You didn't love it that much.
Yes, and I think without any diplomatic channel, there is no other way but to strike Iran. And here the question is, who will participate in a coalition? Certainly it will be American-led. I hope it will be American-led, although Israel can go alone, but not as effectively if we do go with the Americans and possibly other Western allies.
And 30 seconds till the break. Jonathan Regev, who could those other allies likely be?
It would have to be the United States and European allies. They're the ones that are meant to act together. It is if you disrupt the shipping in the Suez Canal, it also has implications on Europe. Will the Europeans, will the British and the French and the Germans, will they happily join the United States of Donald Trump? Not so sure. They have other issues bothering them regarding the American administration. Not so sure they will be very fast to join Donald Trump when it comes to Yemen.
Certainly all eyes on the region. Much more to discuss. Gentlemen, stay with us right now. We're taking a very quick break, but when we get back, it's an all-time high for El Al. The Israeli Airlines profits soaring to new heights during the war. We take a look at possible turbulence, so to speak, in the future. Back in a bit. Stay tuned. This is The Rundown.
Now, more than ever, we are all joining forces at the front lines and the home front in medicine, technology, research and development with hope. And together strengthen the Negev. Ben-Gurion University, the University of the Negev.
Dance, music, and magic immerse you in the story of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, an unforgettable musical where the past and present meet. Welcome to the heart of the most sought-after city in the world. A unique experience only at Kikar HaMusika. Reserve now at thisisjerusalem.co.il.
Introducing the brand new i24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions and expert commentary, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News Video On Demand app today. The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on i24 News.
a turbulent time for many Israeli businesses during the war, but not for El Al, the flagship airline, posting a record high profit of $545 million in 2024 as it monopolized travel in and out of the country. Major foreign carriers suspending their routes, meaning, in short, travelers had no choice. El Al releasing these record-breaking figures earlier on Wednesday. Now, driving its gains was its near monopoly on flights to North America, the company saying it controlled 97.5% of the market share for those routes, with planes 96% full on average. The question now is, how long will that market dominance last? No one better than Dr. Alex Coleman, economy expert at Tel Aviv University, to help give us an answer. So those profit margins aren't a huge shock, given the fact we all know how incredibly expensive it's been to travel during the war. What do you make to start of these profits? Are you surprised?
Well, first of all, if I were the CEO of El Al, I would do the same thing. I would increase the profits as much as possible, because that's the mandate that the CEO she got, and she did a great job. Who didn't do a good job is Israel's government, because during COVID, El Al was on the brink of bankruptcy. And Israel's government gave them hundreds of millions of dollars in support, but they did not put a caveat there, either that they would not withdraw dividends, or, for instance, they did not pay taxes in the first quarter of the year, because they still had losses from the COVID. So they made an incredible profit. They did not pay taxes. And actually, they recovered the whole price that they paid for the company. They recovered from the profits during this year. So it's a fantastic deal for them. It's a very bad deal for us. And even today, I think it's not worthwhile flying with El Al, because now that you have competition, you have quite a few airlines flying in and out of the country. I think that their prices are not competitive. They're still stuck on the inertia that they could get high prices, exorbitant prices, and they could go do away with that. Another reason why the government is guilty for that is because part of the reason that many low-cost airlines did not fly is because Terminal 1, which is the low-cost, the budget terminal, it was shut down. So they had to fly from Terminal 3, which is much more expensive. Now, this is something that the country obviously could take care of, subsidizing or opening the terminal nevertheless or whatever. But because of negligence, only Terminal 3 was open, so El Al and maybe Arkia Israel flew. And as a result, they basically had a killing.
Prohibitively expensive for the average person to travel.
Absolutely.
The war is ongoing, but there is a sense that more airlines soon are going to start flying into the country. Hopefully, it's a precarious situation, no doubt about that. What does it look like for the future? What does it mean for prices? In short, are the prices going to drop?
Well, the prices are definitely going to drop. And I think that if Israelis are mad enough and furious, saying, wait, we subsidized them with hundreds of millions of dollars, and now they took advantage of us and all of that, I really hope that Israelis would fly with other airlines. And there are many other airlines, JN, low cost, Wizz, what have you. So there's no shortage of airlines flying in and out of the country. And I hope that Israelis would penalize them, so that the CEO, she would realize that if she keeps on going with those exorbitant prices, she's going to lose money.
There are many passengers, travelers, or would-be travelers who feel, frankly, they've been ripped off. Is there some level of ethical issue here? It's wartime. Business is business, yes. But for people to just be able to travel, in many cases, just to go and see families abroad potentially, to go and see sick relatives potentially, Absolutely. There is a sense that this carrier has ripped the public off. Is that fair?
Absolutely. It's not fair. It's not ethical. But I think that ethics and fairness play a minor role, mainly if you think about PR people or advertising or whatever. But at the bottom line, when the CEO sits and she has to decide how much is a ticket to New York going to cost, when we have, as she mentioned, I'm so surprised that she mentioned it, 97 point whatever % of the line to New York. The top is, how do we make tons of money and recover our costs from buying the company? And ethics and all the rest is somewhere down the stream.
Unfortunately.
Sadly.
Very briefly, holiday times will come up in a couple of months. A lot of people want to fly abroad, but is there some kind of campaign or incentive for people to invest in being on holiday, traveling, and going to places inside of the country, given the knock of the war economically for so many businesses?
Well, first of all, people have done that during the war when it was exorbitant to fly abroad.
They had no choice.
They had no choice. Israel is incredibly expensive. So when you look at, for instance, there's a new airline now called Haifa Air, which flies to Cyprus. So you see that if you take into account the cost of the flight and the cost of staying there, it's much more advantageous. I just returned from Rome. Prices in Rome are incredibly lower than in Israel. So I think, again, if we go talk about the ethical, the nice thing to do is to help people, particularly in the north and in the south, who were really, really badly damaged during the war, to help them. On the other hand, you say, wait, but a night here costs me like a week in Rome or in Cyprus or what have you. So people, when they balance that, especially if they have a large family and they don't have so many reserves, I think people do go abroad.
We always appreciate your insights. Dr. Alex Coleman, interesting times indeed. We wait to see how it all unfolds, how those flights take to the skies. Dr. Alex Coleman, a pleasure having you here in studio. Now, back to one of our top stories. The families of the 59 hostages still in terror captivity are calling for urgent steps to get their loved ones home. 24 of the hostages are believed to be alive, as our correspondent Balich Sladin confirmed just a short while ago. Now, one of them is 21-year-old Israeli soldier Matan Angrest, who appeared in the most recent propaganda video published by Hamas. In the video, he says he's been held for 511 days, so it was likely filmed at the start of the month. In it, he calls on the Israeli government, President Donald Trump, and Israeli military leaders to secure his release. Later, the Angrest family publishing a photograph of him from captivity from a separate video they'd received from the terror group. Matan's mother, Anat Angrest, describing images in the video as shocking. It includes pictures showing him being brutally beaten. Now, for more, we go to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. He joins us from the U.S. State Department in Washington. Difficult to imagine, Mike, what the families of the hostages are going through right now, this agonizing wait. You have been speaking to Matan Angrest's father, Chagai, and brother, Ophir, who are in D.C. Tell us more. One cannot imagine.
That's correct, Benita. Another delegation of hostage family members here in Washington this week to urge whoever will listen at the White House, here at the State Department, at the Capitol, whoever will listen to their message that it's urgent to get all those remaining hostages home, not tomorrow, not next week, but today, as soon as humanly possible, and especially with the video and the subsequent images of Matan Angrest distributed by Hamas and sent to the family last weekend, and the damage you can see to the body of Matan in those photos. It becomes all the more urgent. We asked Matan's father, Chagai, this morning before he and his one of his children departed back to Israel, what was the message they delivered to the likes of Morgan Ortagus, the Deputy Special Envoy for the Middle East in the Trump administration, Tim Lenderking, who heads up Middle East affairs here at the State Department, members of Congress as well, even Paula White, Donald Trump's spiritual advisor and the head of the White House Faith Office, all met with these hostage family members. What was the message that they're delivering to those administrators? Let's give a listen earlier today to Chagai Angrest.
The message is, Matan, have no time. We must release him as soon as possible. We saw it is very difficult for us to see the video that Hamas show us on Friday. We saw that the hand not moving, the face broken, the nose broken, something with the eyes. Everything not in the place. It is very difficult to us. We know today Matan live, tomorrow we don't know. We don't know what will happen. And we ask from the White House that open his door, please do everything to release Matan and all the hostages. 59 people that sitting there, and Matan is serious injured, and we must do everything to release him.
Now, it's become certainly more clear as of late that there are sometimes divergent strategies between how the Trump administration wants to handle things and the Netanyahu government in Jerusalem wants to do it. Became evident when it was reported that Trump and his administration went around Israel to talk to Hamas officials directly about a potential hostage deal and ceasefire extension. We asked Matan Ungres, what do you want to see here in terms of coordination from the Trump government and the Netanyahu government to get a deal done and get the hostages home? Let's give a listen.
They need to work together to release the hostages, Netanyahu and President Trump. We know that Netanyahu wants to release them. We want that USA, Trump and Netanyahu working together, and we'll release them as soon as possible. And the way is only in deal. The way is only with deal and not a military attack or something like this, because this is very dangerous to the hostages. And we know in Israel, 70% of the citizens wants stop the war and release all the hostages. This is what in Israel wants.
Well, we know from hearing from hostages who have been released, Benita, that they have seen I-24 News while in captivity. I asked Matan's father, Chagai, and one of his three younger brothers, Ophir, what message they would like to pass along to Matan just in case he's listening today. Let's hear what they had to say.
Matan, be strong. We are doing everything in all over the world, and we hope that we will success as soon as possible. Love you very much and be strong. We will meet together.
Be strong. We are with you. We're doing everything. We are right now in Washington, fight for your life. And we hope and know that we'll be with you together and we will hug you soon.
Gut-wrenching to hear the pain, the waiting of families of the hostages. I hope Matan is hearing this and knows that the entire nation is hoping and praying for good news. Senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim at the U.S. State Department in Washington, thank you so much. Beyond devastating, and the waiting continues. Now to the West Bank. Israeli security forces have found stockpiles of weapons, including explosives and around 100 kilograms of materials for making bombs. 12 wanted terror suspects were arrested overnight. Dozens of suspects were interrogated, and separately, IDF forces destroying the house of the terrorist Ali Khalil, who carried out a terror attack in Qalqilia in June last year. Grandfather Amnon Mukhtar was murdered in his vehicle while shopping in the Palestinian town. He is survived by 5 children, one of whom celebrated their wedding 2 months ago. The pain across the nation. Security analyst Jonathan Regev. We're hearing hostage families there speaking to Mike Wagenheim in Washington, begging for answers so that their loved ones can come home. And here in the West Bank, the pain of another Israeli family is palpable because of developments on the state. Tell us more.
Yes, first, a question that has to be asked is why do Israeli families have to be begging in Washington? There's a government in Israel. Why is the begging there? They should be talking to the government here, not there. But it seems as if the moves also of the Israeli government are dictated from Washington more than they are here. That is one thing. On the other hand, there's a lot of criticism coming from the families, the hostage families, and those who support the deal to bring back the other hostages, saying that every price should be paid to bring back the hostages. Those who oppose the deal They're a minority, but a considerable minority. They're saying, look exactly at this case from the West Bank. Israel has released nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. Some of them people serving life sentences for murder. And those people are out back in the streets. And what happens if they're out in the streets is these kind of attacks. And that is what these people are saying. Look, this is exactly these kind of attacks. This attack which killed Amnon Mukhtar is exactly why those people should be kept in jail. And the price that Israel is paying is simply too high. And this is, of course, a very big problem that Israel is now facing. On the other hand, 59 living hostages, 24 of them are said to be alive, and Israel has to do everything to bring them back. But is that everything that has to be done to bring them back? Does that also mean putting Israel in danger, knowingly putting other Israelis in danger because you put dangerous people out in the streets? It's a very difficult dilemma.
A dilemma indeed, but the priorities for Israel are very clear.
Yes, and it seems like the priorities are actually being dictated by a small minority of the government itself. Smotrich and Strzok and Ben-Gvir is no longer in the government, but still from the outside is pushing. So it seems like Netanyahu is giving more priority to political considerations than to, let's say, ethical or Jewish ways. It's very hard, excruciatingly hard, but it seems to me that if there was a way to even Israel evacuate Gaza for all the hostages in one stroke, I think that's something that the public here would very much like and support. And then, of course, when Gaza is clear, free out of any hostages, then Israel can do much more in terms of eliminating Hamas than we can do now, because we have to be just walking on eggshells in order not to hurt the hostages.
523 days in terror captivity to our knowledge, the knowledge of the world. 24 hostages are alive. An agonizing, heartbreaking situation. We wait for an outcome, hopefully, from Doha. If and when it happens, we will be bringing you all the details here on I-24 News. Security analyst Jonathan Regev, Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the US. Appreciate you both being here in studio. Thank you so much. Now, after decades in exile, Prince Mohammed Ali, the grandson of Egypt's last king, has made a quiet return to Cairo. Now, while he insists he has no political ambitions, his presence symbolizes an historical reconciliation between Egypt's royalist past and its Republican present. More in this report by our Yulia Pobagailova.
More than 70 years after Egypt's monarchy was overthrown, a royal heir has quietly returned. Prince Mohammed Ali, the grandson of King Farouk, has left his life in Paris to settle in Cairo, a city his family was forced to leave in 1952.
For me, it's a dream. As heir to the dynasty, I now realize that my settling here, and through me, the return of the royal family, symbolizes for Egyptians a reunion between royalist and republican Egypt.
Muhammad Ali's father, Fahd II, was Egypt's last king, crowned as an infant, but exiled just months later when the monarchy was abolished, and the family had no legal right to return. It took the personal intervention of Morocco's King Hassan II to convince President Anwar Sadat to allow Muhammad Ali's mother to give birth in Cairo, alone and in secrecy. But even being born in Cairo didn't automatically make him Egyptian. For years, Muhammad Ali had no official proof of nationality. It was only in 2020 that he was finally granted an Egyptian passport. Egypt's view of its royal history is now shifting. Decades after the Nasser-led revolution vilified the monarchy, younger Egyptians are re-examining their country's past through books, TV series, and documentaries. Even President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has acknowledged the royal family's role, issuing a diplomatic passport to Fahd II in 2014, officially recognizing him as, quote, former king of Egypt.
President Sisi recognized the heritage of the royal family. This is a significant change, and to be here now is a blessing for us.
Muhammad Ali, who built a career in real estate in Paris, says his return was partly encouraged by his wife, Nawal Zaher, herself a princess from Afghanistan's deposed royal family. Now he hopes to reconnect with his roots and ensure that his grandchildren grow up as Egyptians.
For my father, Egypt was a lost homeland. For me, it is a regained homeland. I simply want to work on preserving and passing down the historical, cultural, and artistic heritage of the Egyptian royal family.
A royal without a throne, Muhammad Ali says his focus is on history, not politics. But his quiet return to Egypt signals a reconciliation of past and present.
Turning our focus to the treatment of trauma following October 7th, as the war continues more than 17 months since the darkest day in the history of the country, we take a deeper look at efforts to establish a national authority for post-trauma treatment, a central body to coordinate the fight against the growing challenges. And for that, we now welcome Gela Tolub, who arrived in Israel before the war started and found herself at the heart of the national crisis. Welcome, the co-founder and executive director of Ikar Collective. Thank you so much for being here. The nation is still processing the magnitude of what happened on October 7th, the scale of it, the depravity, the brutality, and right now, so much pain still. Talk to us about your initial assessment, your reaction to October 7th.
Sure. So I think, like you say, October 7th really caught us in a place that no developed market have seen before. Nothing of that scale that touches the entire, country. And trauma is actually a pretty recent field of studies. We've only been studying trauma for, 40 years since the Vietnam War, and collective trauma much less. And so one of the first things we realized at the beginning of the war is that we're in uncharted water. We don't really have protocols that tell us, if this happens, you should do this, you should do that. And most people realize this quickly, the scale of it, the existential threat that really all of us have felt, but also the fact that it continues. It continues and it continues. It's not like we were in a car accident and now we can start to process what happened, create a new narrative of how we're going to now continue to live our life, because we're still in it.
The fact that it is ongoing is part of the trauma, and so much still to make sense of, so much still to process. What are the gaps that you have picked up in this time? Where is Israel lacking, so to speak, in terms of dealing with trauma and working towards healing?
Right. So a few things are clear. Besides for this lack of protocols, which is not, by the way, special to Israel because it's a global issue, what we see in Israel is a fragmentation that is, really acute. So it's not only the HMOs, the Kupot Cholim that are providing care, it's also the government hospitals that are owned by the government, the mental health hospital, and it's also a lot of NGOs, a lot of nonprofit entities. And one of the first things that we did at Ikar Collective is to actually map who's doing what. We've identified more than 335 projects. 230 accounted for 90% of the turnover, so we looked at those in more details. We spoke with more than 120 to really understand who's doing what. And that fragmentation makes it really hard for a lot of reasons. One, for continuity of care. Someone can start somewhere, continue somewhere, can actually go to two different places and get treatment, so it creates inefficiencies. But also, right now, when you have a lot of philanthropists that want to help, public funders, they don't know exactly where we need the most support. And so that's also where we come in with our scientific advisory board that say, what are those areas where we could actually accelerate the healing? What can we do differently to recover more quickly?
And briefly, where do people go? People who want to get involved, want to get help, who should they turn to?
So that's actually a really hard question in Israel. Because of this fragmentation, the answer is, are they civilian or are they soldiers? If they're soldiers, are they reservists or are they still Sadir in the first 3 years? That's one of the things that we find very hard in terms of psychoeducation. Instead of telling people where they should go, we're working now into making some more order in that situation.
a long road ahead, but certainly a nation that is resilient and a nation that is unified. Appreciate you being here. Gila Tulob, all the best with your initiative. Thank you so much. And talking about the fact that the war is ongoing and trauma is ongoing, we have news just in out of the West Bank, reports of a shooting attack in the Israeli city of Ariel in the West Bank. One person has been moderately wounded. This is a developing situation. New information just in out of the West Bank, a shooting attack in the city of Ariel. One person has been moderately wounded. And on that note, we wrap up this edition of The Rundown. I'm Benita Levine. Our coverage continues. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching. This is I24 News.
Introducing the brand new I24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions and expert commentary, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the I24 News Video On Demand app today. The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on I24 News.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing I24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the I24 News app today.
Everybody ready?
welcome to Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Every week, we're focusing on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interest here in Israel and in the diaspora, the global Jewish community. And we start with our top 5 items in the Jewish world, presented by Nicole Zedek. Hi, Nicole.
Thanks, Emily. Here are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. It was a historic night for Jews in Hollywood at the 97th Academy Awards. Adrian Brody and Mikey Madison won Best Actor and Best Actress, marking the first time in decades that Jewish actors have swept both top categories. Best Supporting Actor went to a co-star in the film A Real Pain, which is about Jewish cousins visiting the Majdanek concentration camp, while The Brutalist, which explores a Holocaust survivor's experience with anti-Semitism in America, won for Best Cinematography and Score. Russia says it thwarted a terror attack on a Jewish institution in the Moscow metro. A Central Asian-born suspect planned to detonate explosives but was killed in a shootout with security forces. He had pledged allegiance to an unnamed terror group and allegedly intended to join its ranks in Afghanistan after the attack. The Kremlin says the incident highlights ongoing security threats to Jewish communities in the region. Israel has ended its diplomatic boycott of several European far-right parties, despite their histories of anti-Semitism allegations. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar announced that Israel will now engage with France's National Rally, Sweden Democrats, and Spain's Vox, like any other political party. The move follows their vocal support for Israel and commitments to combat anti-Semitism, though critics remain skeptical of their transformation. Kosher food prices have surged globally, with inflation and supply chain disruptions driving up costs. In the U.S., some kosher staples are now 20% more expensive than last year, making it harder for Jewish families to afford traditional diets. Reports also say that the U.S.-Canada tariff war may raise kosher food prices by 60%. And Adidas has sold its last remaining Yeezy sneakers, ending its liquidation of the brand tied to Ye, formerly known as Kanye West. The company cut ties with Ye in 2022 after his anti-Semitic remarks, leading to massive losses. Adidas has since pledged part of the Yeezy sale proceeds, totaling $690 million this year, to groups fighting anti-Semitism, including the Anti-Defamation League. Those are your top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Emily.
The famous diary of Anne Frank has withstood the test of time for over 80 years after she started writing it. In the last year and a half, global anti-Semitism and anti-Israel vitriol has risen to alarming levels. And now, for the first time in history, Anne Frank's famous hiding place is on full display in New York City's Union Square. And it is something that opened on the end of January's International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which also marked 80 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. Joining us now from Amsterdam is Tom Brink, the head of collections and presentations at the Anne Frank House. Hello, and thank you for being here. Last time was during COVID.
Hello. It was, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So this is definitely something you have all been working hard on. I know the plans were in the works also before October 7th. So talk about the, first of all, since October 7th, we know as many as 1 million people come a year to the location in Amsterdam. Have you seen more people seeking to be educated, or has it been tense?
That's hard to say. You know, the tickets for the museum are sold out almost every day throughout the year. And that was before October 7th, and that still is the case after October 7th. So it's really hard to measure whether demand has increased and if there really is a post-October the 7th effect.
Well, the fact is it's full
I wouldn't
still.
dare to say. It's full still, absolutely, yes. We have about 1.3 million visitors a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that says a lot. At least, you know, it is something still, of course, so relevant. So let's talk about the exhibition in New York. It's in Union Square. Again, I know it wasn't planned. I mean, it was planned before October 7th, but I guess the timing has made it that much more important now.
Yeah, I think we can say that. Although we planned it, we've been working on this for a couple of years actually, and that is the reason for that is actually twofold. On the one hand, it is, as I just said, we're almost always sold out, and the museum is almost always sold out, and so we know that many of the people coming to Amsterdam would like to visit the museum, but tickets are sold out, so they can't. But also, there's many people who can simply not travel to Amsterdam because of different reasons, and we have been looking into ways to kind of bring the story to them as well. But this is more like I would say like a logistical reason. But then again, we see that anti-Semitism has been on the rise for years now, for the last years, and that is, I think, the most important reason why we wanted to do something outside Amsterdam, and this exhibit is one of the examples that really, helps us bring across this story to a different audience, not only in Amsterdam.
Yeah. So you guys were able to recreate Anne Frank and her family's hiding place, the famous attic that we all know about. So tell us about that. And also, there's a lot of archival materials that haven't been seen before that have been become part of this exhibition. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. Absolutely, and although the recreation of the hiding place has understandably gained a lot of interest and attracted a lot of interest, but the exhibition is actually much more than that. The entire exhibition spends, I think, almost a century covering the Frank family's history from the early 20th century in Frankfurt. So that is before the rise of Hitler, and that was when the family was still a well-to-do Jewish and German family. As Otto always said, we were as Jewish as we were German. That is where the exhibition starts. And then in 1929, after the economic crisis, and also the political and social crisis in Germany starts, we see that Jews are all of a sudden, more or less, they are like a problem, and they are the scapegoat for everything that goes wrong. And well, that is what we all tell in this exhibition, and then they have to flee to Amsterdam. And this is kind of, if you say, this is kind of I would almost say a classic exhibition with lots and lots of original artifacts from the family. And it is like we have silverware, we have tableware from Frankfurt, we have furniture, but also very, very nice, like the small, what we call poetry books, which are kind of like a friendship book where Margot and Anne wrote little poems for their friends in, and all these kind of very, very intimate personal items as well.
That is so interesting. For example,
and it's also that is like, it is a very personal and intimate approach. And that goes for the hiding place as well. What we did is we meticulously recreated the hiding place with all its details, as we know from here in Amsterdam, of course. It is the structure, the wallpaper, but also the pictures from the magazines that then cut out of magazines and stuck to the wall. And also, it is where it really differs from Amsterdam. We have furbished the hiding place in New York, in the exhibition in New York, with furniture and artifacts from the time. These are not the original furniture and artifacts from the Frank family, because that was taken away after they were arrested here in Amsterdam, but they are from the time. So you walk through the rooms and it is like the family and the other people in hiding are still there. And we see that wonderful, and those are original artifacts that show that the people in hiding thought of it as a temporary situation. Margot, for example, did a Latin course. She was preparing for study after leaving the hiding place, and Fritz Pfeffer, one of the people in hiding as well, his Spanish textbook is on display because he prepared for immigration to South America after the liberation. And one piece I personally find very, very touching is Auguste van Pel's festive dress. It is her original dress, and we think that she kept it for after the liberation, to wear it after the liberation. But well, as we all know, it never came to them.
Wow, it's so incredible, and everybody should go see it in New York. Tom Brink, thank you again. Good to see you again, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person in the near future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
President Trump plans to cut more than 90% of U.S. aid, foreign aid contracts, and eliminate $60 billion in overall U.S. assistance around the world. Among the numerous countries who will feel the lasting effects of this decision is Uganda, which has a small Jewish population. Joining us now from Uganda is medical officer Dr. Samson Wamani. Thank you for being here. I know you're working very hard.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for welcoming me on the show.
Of course, of course. So with at least 30% of Africans living in extreme poverty and with the cuts of 60 billion worldwide, how is this going to affect the people of Uganda in particular?
Well, the aid has beaten us hard. We're already having the effects ranging from simple healthcare delivery systems at the village level up to national level. We are having problems in implementing mother-to-child services, immunization. We are having challenges in implementing very basic and very important healthcare systems at village level. We are having problems in the recent Ebola, where we had issues in getting infection prevention and control materials in order to make sure that the disease does not go out of hand. Previously, we had, with USAID, we had everything at our disposal, right from investigations to prevention. So cutting the aid is affecting the lowest person, the person who doesn't know the politics of the world, but we're getting it very hard.
I understand there's more than 2,000 Jews in Uganda. Explain what the community experience is like. How do the the other people in your country treat the Jewish community? Is there fear? Is there violence? Is there anti-Semitism?
No one actually knows us so much. When you say that I'm Jewish, some people think that's a joke. You know,
right?
Hey, Jewish. You must be a white to be a Jew. Mm-hmm. So some people think we're just joking around. And for those ones who know that actually we are Jewish, don't care so much. Actually, for us in Uganda, what separates us is the day and the house of prayer. No one really cares about who is who. We don't even actually introduce ourselves by name. And because most of our names are like English names, Samson, no one thinks it is a Hebrew name. So no one has ever cared. We don't have any of recent. We've not had any problem with our Muslim or Christian neighbors. But back then, in 1970s, during the Idi Amin rule, it was more pronounced that people could not mention that they were Jewish. Right now, it's not a problem because of the freedom to worship in the Constitution.
Well, that's comforting to hear that there is a country in the world where where the Jews are not being targeted. So keep up the good work, saving lives, and being such a role model and a leader, not just in your community, but for the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's for me and for the rest of us who are in the healthcare system. It's a calling. It's building and bringing back that smile to somebody who has lost the hope. We feel like it's the mitzvah, which I have to fulfill. I feel that's what I'm made to do.
Wow.
I feel that's the only way I can be useful in this world. You know, when I qualified as a medical officer, I was in Kampala. But I felt like there are so many doctors in Kampala. The best way I can be useful in this world is to go back to the village. I believe Hashem made it by purpose that I should be born in that village.
Wow.
Not in Kampala and not in New York. So the best way is to make sure that you make the world a better place more than you found it.
Wow.
Yeah. Make sure that you bring a smile. Create that difference when you still can. And the time is now.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful, and so well said. And thank you for bringing a smile to my face as well. So we need to see you here in Israel. Come visit us.
Thank you.
A Jewish American rapper, singer, and songwriter is bringing his beats and rhythms to music lovers around the world. Ari Benjamin Lesser is joining us now via Zoom from Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome, and it must be very cold where you are right now.
So nice to be here, Emily. Thank you. Yeah, it is. It's snowing outside right now.
Oh, wow. So you're warming up everybody's hearts by your tunes. You've been on the scene for quite a while. Tell us kind of how this calling began to bring your own special renditions of King David's Psalms amongst so many other very important works.
Yeah, so I was writing songs for about 7 years before I first came across the Book of Psalms. And, you know, I know that Psalms is part of Jewish tradition, but I never really read what King David was writing about. And once I started to dive into the book, I was like, these would make some pretty interesting lyrics. So I've done a lot of work translating the Psalms into English, really trying to keep them accurate, make them rhyme. And that was the beginning of my journey into Torah, into Yiddishkeit Judaism, and using my songwriting abilities in that work.
Well, and translating it and then making it rhyme, that's a challenge.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a puzzle. You know, I do some songs that are all original, and those are much more creative. When I'm taking a translation, it's more mathematical. I got to figure out how can I say exactly the same thing in a different language,
right,
and make it rhyme.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've done it pretty well. Also, explain, you came to Israel on birthright, and that was kind of the defining moment for you in your journey.
Well, definitely, it was a big moment. I came birthright, I think, in 2012, and I knew I wanted to explore the Holy Land while I was there. So before I even went, I pushed my return flight to the maximum, which was, I think, 3 months. And I had the first month planned out. The other 2 months, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I ended up traveling around, visiting all the amazing holy spots. Obviously, birthright's incredible. They take you to a lot of great places, but I had to go to Hebron. I wanted to go to Beit Lechem, other places that, you know, they don't take you. And then I ended up learning in yeshiva, both in Yerushalayim and eventually up in Sfat, and staying for a year. I skipped my return flight. I couldn't leave.
Question is, did you get a refund on the difference? Of course not, right?
No, I did not. I had to buy a new flight.
Yeah. So with your work, and given that, you know, you are, you know, out there, you're definitely out there, what has been your experience since October 7th? Are you getting a lot of, you know, anti-Semitism, pushback, hate messages on your platforms? Tell us.
Well, absolutely. You know, I've always dealt with this. You know, I put out a song called "Boycott Israel," which was kind of like, boycott Israel if you think that's just, but unless you have a double standard, you must also boycott the rest of the nations with allegations of human rights violations. We're not perfect, but if you think we're the worst, first take a look at the rest of the earth. Don't pick and choose to pick on the Jews. Pick up the paper and read the news.
Wow.
And then I go through like 40 different countries that are all having serious human rights abuse issues. So I did that in 2013 and certainly got lots of anti-Semitism, lots of pushback. But what I'll say is, like, the level that I would get, like the worst thing I would see then would be maybe like Holocaust denial, right? People who they thought there was some big conspiracy. Now we've moved into like a whole worse area where there's really people who are praising the Holocaust. It's really disgusting stuff that I'm seeing now. And not just a few people. It's, you know, I posted a piece for the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Just pure, not a political piece, just talking about the history, remembering what happened to our people. And the comments were just shocking and appalling. I mean, if you want, you can look on my Instagram at Ari B. Lesser. You can see, I mean, this is the what Jews on social media are dealing with right now. It's really, really scary
stuff.
stuff.
It's easy for people to post and kind of hide behind the fact that they're on social media and not having to put a public face to it. But what do you do? I mean, how do you take the high road, or do you respond? What can you do, if anything?
You know, I've been struggling with this question, and you know, what it really feels like is people are so entrenched. They're so, you know, set in their mindset, in their ways. There's not really any more convincing people through rational arguments. People are being irrational. And so I think the best thing for us to do is just to be a light, to just shine our light, to be positive, to show the beauty of Judaism, show the beauty of Torah, and do it in a positive way that really makes people see that a lot of these stereotypes are just lies, are just totally made up. And I think that positivity and light is the best way to disperse the darkness.
Right, of course. So have you gotten any kind of reaction? I know you've recently talked about Kanye. You know, he's been mouthing off again. You also did a compelling post, you know, about the tragedy of what happened to the Bibas family. So, you know, are you able to break through? Are you able to get some kind of opening, even dialogue, even if Kanye were to respond, maybe you could have a conversation with the guy?
Absolutely. Look, I'm a very open person. I'm happy to engage, dialogue, converse with anybody, and I would love to talk with Kanye if he was interested. If he wants to have a little battle rap to him down for that also. If he wants to spit back, hey, I'll clap back. So bring it on, Kanye.
That would be fun. Can you imagine the two of you on stage going at it? Wow. I know that's a pipe dream.
I did a piece. Macklemore's another, you know, sort of anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist rapper that, you know, has been doing a lot of nasty stuff lately. So I did a piece for him earlier this year, and I even in my mind I started planning stuff like if he comes back, and then he did. He like posted another video, so I had all this stuff ready to go just as soon as he posted his new thing. So
you got an arsenal. You got an arsenal waiting, and sometimes you'll have to release things by necessity, not by choosing when.
Absolutely, absolutely. I prefer to stay positive. I prefer to spread joy. But if these anti-Semites are going to keep opening their mouths in a public way, I'm going to respond. You know, I can't help it.
Amazing. Well, Ari Lessard, thank you so much for being here, and keep up the good work, and come to Israel soon with a non-return ticket like before.
Hopefully live Omer, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Amazing, amazing. I'll see you in the north for Lag BaOmer.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day. All the best, guys.
A new housing program in the Galilee is offering lone soldiers much more than just a home. The Hanaton Educational Center wants to make sure when lone soldiers leave their home countries to come serve in the IDF, they have a community and are supported every step of the way. I-24 News correspondent Nicole Zedek heads to Kibbutz Hanaton for a look at their new initiative.
Being here is really for the future of Israel and also for our students, because it all starts with the individual.
That's the message coming from the Hanaton Educational Center, located in the Galilee.
So the Hanaton Educational Center really wants to empower and educate the next leadership of the State of Israel as a pluralistic leadership.
That's what they teach at their Mechina, or pre-army gap year program, at Kibbutz Hanaton.
Everybody who's here is here because they're looking for more, and they want to be here, and they know that they have an impact and they have a responsibility to the Israeli society.
While the Mechina is in its 13th cohort, there's a new mission also in the works.
Because the connection between the Jewish people and the Jewish state for us is so natural, and we need that connection because we're that togetherness is who we are. We decided to build a parallel program, really, beside the Mechina, for lone soldiers.
A lone soldier is an immigrant who enlists in the Israeli military without any family in the Jewish state.
I came as a Jew from overseas, and I knew that I wanted to strengthen my identity, and I wanted to learn Hebrew and to know what it was to be Israeli before I drafted into the army. That was my dream, was to draft into the army, and I knew that I had to do the preparation.
Morty participated in the Mechina before enlisting in the army, but when he was a lone soldier, there was no option for housing.
So 4 years on, sometimes I forget how hard it really was. How hard it really is to finish the army, leave the army Thursday night at 8 o'clock, have to go somewhere to some family that I don't really know at the edge of the country, come with all my laundry like here, dump it on them, and then they make dinner for you, so you have to be nice and you have to sit and all that, and it's all great, but really all you want to do is go to sleep and not talk to anyone.
Without a home base, he was couch surfing nearly every weekend during his time in the IDF.
My story, I really am thankful and appreciative of all those people who did help me, because without them it would be impossible. But looking back, I mean, I can only dream about a framework that would guide me from the day I landed to the day I was released, and to help me reintegrate again all those things that I did by myself the hard way.
Well, lone soldiers are released from the army, they stay lone. They stay lone, lone release soldiers. They don't have a family here. They don't have a home here. It's important for us to accompany these lone soldiers when they're released from the army, to accompany them 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead. We want those lone soldiers that want to be a part of Israel. We know how hard it is.
The vision for the new Lone Soldier Initiative came to light with the help of a former lone soldier.
So Michael Greenberg came here as a lone soldier in the late 60s, 68, and joined the paratroopers. Being a lone soldier, he wanted to build those homes for those lone soldiers, and he was a conservative Jew. So it just came all together here when he came here.
That's one of the things that makes the Hanaton Educational Center so unique.
There's right now only two solutions. You go to a secular kibbutz or to an Orthodox kibbutz, which, by the way, is great, is magnificent, but there's more to that. There's more richness to that. You have to talk about a Jewish perspective doesn't hold only extremes, but can hold a wide range of identities, whether you're secular or reform or conservative or Orthodox or modern Orthodox or not modern Orthodox. So we want to open that, and we want to give people a sense of home.
This is the first lone soldier housing for conservative and reform Jews, a middle ground offering options for everyone.
We decided to really build them a physical home, and with this community would give them their spiritual home.
I think the kibbutz offers like a more small-scale opportunity to integrate into society. It also offers community, which is something that a lot of people look for no matter where they are.
Providing a much-needed community to the lone soldiers leaving theirs behind to serve the state of Israel. Reporting from the Galilee, Nicole Zedek for I-24 News.